Hey, blessed Tuesday as we come with your daily encouragement. And we've been going through First Peter chapter 2 right now. We're kind of finishing that and going into chapter 3. As I've been stating, we are in the midst of talking about some the more controversial parts of this. Specifically, the how do we view slavery as Christians? And how do we view submission as Christians? And so there's a lot of nuances to this. Some have argued, and I think quite wrongly, that this is an overall perspective of politics. I do not believe so. But I do believe it is our attitude to be servants and to be enslaved to God rather than enslaved to sin. And so a lot of the imagery that Peter is using is the same as Paul uses. In fact, there are some differences between Peter and Paul, but in this topic, there's some interesting parallels, if not congruity, going on here. So, when we talk about slavery, I don't think that the Christian of this New Testament era um, viewed that they were ever going to be out of power, out of that slave position. And so that's the thing that I think you have to have in the background is that either Peter or Paul or any of the early Christian thinkers never viewed themselves beyond getting above the slavery, or should I say, the persecuted status in life. And so there's less thinking about what it means if you are a Christian in power, but they do deal with when you are Christian out of power, how you are to act. And so we begin in verse 2, beginning with chapter 2, verse 23. And it says, talking about Jesus, once again, Jesus being the ultimate example of what it means to be a servant, a slave, he says, when he was abused, he did not return abuse. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but entrusted himself to the one who judges justly. Now, let's unpack this because, in some ways, this is very similar to Paul's argument in Romans 13 about how we are to view the government. Now, he is not making a plug for monarchy versus democracy or any of those types of strong political theories, but what he is assuming is that above any government, whether it's just or unjust, is the rule not just of law, but the rule of God. And I think that that is something that we have preserved in our country with the phrase, the oft quoted and oft misunderstood phrase, in God we trust. While we, as Americans, have tried to be a city set on a hill, have tried to strive to be a land of light, justice, and righteousness, just as the people of God, when they received the Ten Commandments, if you talk to a modern day Jew, they'll say that God has given them a mission to bring just laws to the world because they are the representatives of God. And that is a very similar thing that Christians have adopted. But in this passage, it's just the assumption that you will have times where you will be persecuted. And the question is not so much how you respond, you're to respond in, at least initially, when you are abused, do not return abuse, just as Jesus did. When he suffered, he entrusted himself not to the injustice, but he entrusted himself to the God who would change things, the God who would rescue him out of slavery. Now, even in our very active and political environment, we'll probably try to advocate sometimes social revolutions, change people's minds about certain things, and that will be part of Christian activism. It's not so much when you see something wrong in the world that you stand by and just simply pray. You stand by and pray and work towards its rectification. And but you start out with the idea that for whatever reason we do not understand it, we're going to have times where we're going to have an unjust situation, an unjust ruler. I've had times where I've questioned, okay, if God, if you're on my side, how come it seems that everything today is going so badly? whether it be sometimes we have losses in our um, different companies we might be dealing with, different situations, maybe even down to our car. And this is a first world thing, our car breaking down, and we're getting all these bills that we wonder, are we ever going to have enough to pay for some of these things? Or we struggle with day to day type things, and you're saying, as a child of God, why am I struggling with these things? Or maybe it's a person or group of people you're struggling with. Maybe it's even losses in politics that you're so right or you think you're so right about. We are going to have these disagreements and these situations come up, but we trust that above them all is a God who, for whatever reason, is allowing it at this time, but is also the same God who can alleviate the situation in the near future. What we are called to do is to struggle through it. Now, I've brought up some economic and some social things, but maybe even it is even health things. I believe that I have some mission and God has given me some sort of disease that is preventing me from doing this. These are some of the same questions that even our Lord Jesus struggled with in the Garden of Gethsemane when he is both praying for the unity. He's also asking the Lord to have this cup passed from him. Now, the cup is still given to him, but he trusts and is entrusted in the God who is above the cup, the God who is above the cross, the God who has resurrection on his mind too, even when we get to the end. So, all of these things are very important to consider when we are going through struggles. As I've said before, these are not elaborate political theories. These are, when you find yourself in the situation, the first thing is to pray and to model Christ, to first submit to the situation and then pray, earnestly pray, like the psalmist, for its alleviation at some time and in some place. And God will provide you. And that may mean social activism. That may mean revolution. That may mean um, nonviolent revolution like Martin Luther King did, or even some slaves did back in the day of the Civil War. And sometimes, unfortunately, it can lead to taking up arms. But on the first level, that's what at least First Peter and Paul are talking about. What it means to submit to the God who is above the fray. God bless you today. We'll trust, and these are words of encouragement for you. Take care. We'll see you next time.